Welcome to Unit 5 Part 2 video notes. All we have left to do is talk about World War I. World War I starts off as a European thing. War starts in 1914, and the big countries we want to think about are Germany and Austria-Hungary, the Central Powers, against Russia, France, and the United Kingdom. The key to this map is there ain't no United States at the beginning of World War I. It is a European deal. How do we feel about it over in the United States? Well, we don't want to get involved. At the beginning of the year, the beginning of the war, the United States remains neutral. Neutrality and isolationism, think of them as the exact same thing. The United States want to stay isolated to North America and don't go and get involved in Europe because it's going to be a long, bloody conflict, and it ain't our problem. That's a European problem, man. But the Lusitania changes everything. Now, Germany says if anyone is bringing military supplies to help the Triple Entente, as they were called, United Kingdom, France, and Russia, then we have the right, Germany, to use our subs, these U-2 subs, to do unrestricted submarine warfare, which means we'll blow up any ship in the water. This violates a key idea, which is freedom of the seas. What that means is no one really owns the ocean. If you're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or in the Atlantic Ocean, that's just water. That's not someone's land. And a war shouldn't be conducted, especially against civilians using that water just to go across the ocean. There's this passenger ship, a British passenger ship called the Lusitania, and German submarines sink the Lusitania, killing 1,200 people, including 128 Americans. This is a violation of freedom of seas, and these violations continue, so much so that Woodrow Wilson eventually declares war. Once the United States was isolationist, this arrow is the shift, and that shift was caused by freedom of the seas being violated, and now the United States is in active military engagement. But before we can talk about war, we got to talk about two big social things. Number one, in American society, as these men went to Europe to fight in the war, women filled a great number of jobs, especially factory positions, positions that were needed to support the war effort. Now, this was done for many reasons, but a big one, it was encouraged by people like Susan B. Anthony in the women's suffrage movement, because if women did these jobs, which they did, public opinion for the women's suffrage cause would increase, which it did. So women support industry that helps pass the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. The other thing is that, same idea, a lot of jobs up here in the North, was the amount of African Americans who left the South and filled these jobs. They left the South for two reasons. One, economics, money. This is a economically depressed South. Agricultural base, not a lot of factories. These free African Americans, been free for a long time now, since the 13th Amendment, excuse me, are leaving the South and filling these jobs. That's one thing. Here's the other thing. They leave the South, they're avoiding the Jim Crow segregation of the South to go to the North. So that was called the Great Migration, because a great many of people migrated out of the South. Okay, so we got women supporting industry, we got the Great Migration. Let's go into combat. 1918, the U.S. helps crack the stalemate. It was a tie. You had trench warfare. Those lines were not moving. But the United States tipped the balance of war because of the great amount of troops, 2 million troops, and war resources that helped end World War I by breaking the German and Austro-Hungarian line. Now, Germany surrenders, war's over. Woodrow Wilson has what he calls the 14 points. And he believes that if they are followed, all 14 points, it will eliminate the cause of war. There will be no more war in the world. What a goal to have. Now, these 14 points are kind of listed here. I want to talk about the big four, because these are the big time points that he put forth. The first one, and his list it was number 2, is freedom of the seas. Makes sense. No one owns the water. Don't do any more of the stuff that got the U.S. involved in the first place, which was unrestricted submarine warfare. Okay, that makes sense. 5 is the mandate system. This called for all of Germany and Austria-Hungary's colonial possessions to be taken away from them and given to the victorious parties. 10. Self-determination. This said that the way to avoid war is to have countries develop around the people who are ethnically associated with that country. So wherever there's a lot of Italian people, that's where the Italians will live. Sounds easy, but gets messy. And the last one, number 14, his big idea is a League of Nations, a body of countries that govern problems from getting too out of control. Treaty of Versailles is the actual treaty that was the end of World War I. And there was three things that came from it. First, the French and the English insisted upon punishing Germany. Make them apologize for what they did. Make them pay us a lot of money for what we had to do to end the war. Pay great reparations. Now, this punishment destroyed Germany, almost. And Germans resented the punishments, and it led to World War II. We'll get to that in a couple of chapters. Number 2, new nations were created, like Poland, like Austria, like Hungary. This is self-determination in action. And 3, the League of Nations was created. But you see, there's a huge asterisk next to it right there. Why? Because the United States would reject the Treaty of Versailles. Especially, they would reject the League of Nations. That's why they didn't sign off on the Treaty of Versailles. The United States did not want to get involved in, dragged into European conflicts. Because if you think about it, if the U.S. was in the League of Nations and the League of Nations says, we're going to war, then the United States would have to go too. Now, it's the U.S. Senate that can either approve or reject treaties. So the U.S. Senate rejected the Treaty of Versailles, which is a punch right to the stomach of Woodrow Wilson. His idea rejected by his own people, by the United States Senate.